All right, good evening, everybody. So we've got a few people in the waiting room. We're just letting everybody in tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start real promptly here right at 6 o'clock. We just really appreciate everybody coming out tonight to participate in this conversation and discussion around the Belleview Station area and the really important project that we have at hand here. So we're grateful for having you with us, and we're looking forward to some good conversation tonight. Before we kind of dive into things, Ashley, if you can move to the next slide, I'll get everybody situated a little bit here and give you an idea of what to expect. So tonight we'll have a little presentation. We will have opportunities for questions. There will be breakout rooms for conversation, and there will be a chat box. So you should be able to see the chat box there towards the bottom of your screen where you can type in your questions. If you do have any technical difficulties this evening, we just kind of ask that you log out and come back in. That's usually the best way to fix some of the problems that people might be having. During the meeting, we are going to have everybody muted. That's really a great way for everybody to hear the presentation and for everybody to be able to participate equally. So you'll have that chat box again. We ask you to kind of type in any clarifying questions that you have as we're going through some material and the presentation. You can type those in there and we'll have an opportunity to get to those. And then after the meeting, you'll have that website there where you can access any materials and information that we'll have, including this presentation and the meeting tonight, which will be recorded. So before we dive into a little bit more, I'm going to turn it over here briefly to our Executive Director of Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Ulyss Cleckley.
Oh, hey, yes, thanks, Afor, appreciate it. And thank you for the team's willingness to host this virtual meeting. This is a very important project for not only the city and county of Denver, but an important project for the region. And I apologize for the poor lighting in here. We have a interesting lighting circuit situation here on the 6th floor in the web building, but appreciate the team's time and taking the effort to really host this meeting, and appreciate everybody and all the stakeholders that have joined us tonight to take time out of your schedule to provide feedback on this very important project. And so you'll hear from the project team, and we encourage folks to participate fully so we can get your feedback. And we are very interested in making sure that we build the best project and have the best outcomes out of this I-25 Belleview project. And so thanks for your time. And again, speak up and provide feedback where appropriate, and do it in a respectful manner. And we'll take that into consideration as we move forward. So thank you, and enjoy tonight's session.
All right, thanks, Ulyss. So now I'll introduce kind of the rest of the team, including myself. I maybe should have done that before I started talking, but my name is Afor Chavez, and I will be the moderator tonight. You'll see a lot of the folks here who will be presenting and facilitating are with the City and County of Denver. We do have several folks who are from the Department of Transportation: Ashley Grace, Jane Bond, Geneva Hooten, Brian Pinkerton. No, he's not from Parks and Recreation. That's what happens when you don't put your bio picture in. And then we also have David Gaspers. He's from Community Planning and Development. We wanted to make sure that we were incorporating that good discussion on land use and transportation, so he's here with us. And then we also have John Chesser, who is the project manager. And we wanted to give out a kind of a special shout out and thank you to Roger Sherman. He has been really great with some of the technical support and helping us get everything set up tonight, as well as also Councilwoman Black and her office, because she's been really great at helping get people out and get the word out on this meeting tonight. So thank you to all those people who are here with us today and for presenting. All right, so now we'll go into the kind of the purpose for the evening. Why are we here? So maybe some of you attended the October 7th meeting and you got to learn a little bit about the projects at hand for this area. And tonight we're really not talking so much about the project details as we are really wanting to get feedback from the community and hear from you on what your priorities are for this area. So we just want to make sure that we have a lot of opportunity for that. We'll also be able to then go through this plans and studies. So the agenda tonight is going to be a lot of the plans and studies that have gone into this area. The community, along with City and County of Denver, we put a lot of thought into this, how we want the land to be used and developed. and how we want people to get around, how we want this area to be evolved over the future. So we're going to walk through some of those plans and studies that show kind of the vision for this area. Then we'll pause for some clarification and questions. And then we'll talk about the project at hand and this kind of big defining project that we have that we're able to discuss a little bit further. So we'll highlight that a little bit more, and then we'll talk a little bit more about, we'll have questions and answers and some clarification there. And then we'll go into some breakout sessions. So that's your opportunity to really provide feedback and give us an idea of what you want to see in this area as we move forward. So wanted to make a final note here on that the City and County of Denver, we're not asking for you to vote on the two options that we'll be discussing. We're not asking you for your preference. We're really here just to gather input and then be able to represent the community's values and priorities. So that's what we'll be doing this evening. And I think we can kind of kick it off. I think there's a poll question that you'll see coming to you here on the next screen. All right, here on the screen. So wanted to get an idea from folks on what your transportation modes are. So if you want to go ahead and fill that in, what transportation modes have you used in the past year? All right, I see people tallying in here. Give that just a couple minutes. So in the past year, looks like we've got a good variety of options here. A few more people coming in. All right, looks like we do have a lot of people who drive alone in this area, but a lot of people who walk and bike, use the light rail and the train as well. So good variety of transportation sources here. Yeah, drive alone looks like the top. All right. So that just gives us an idea of kind of who's in the room tonight and what kinds of transportation everybody uses. So I think we can close that down and we can move on. All right. I still see the polling on my screen, but hopefully everybody can kind of see around that. Okay, so this is just kind of a snapshot here of a good kind of visual of where we're at. So that star is where we're at tonight, and that shows kind of all the plans and the studies that have led us to this point, this kind of crossroads of decision making on how we move forward with our projects. And to kind of kick us off on the plans and the studies is David Gaspers from CBD, and he'll talk with us a little bit about the land use and transportation plans that have informed this area so far.
Thanks, Afor. Appreciate the introduction. And yeah, we have two key plans that we look at for the Belleview station. And the first one is Transit-Oriented Denver, which is our TOD strategic plan. And that's actually a more of a strategic implementation of our transit-oriented development, which is largely around our passenger rail locations across Denver on the RTD system. And then Blueprint Denver, which was just adopted last year and is our land use and transportation supplement to the comprehensive plan. It's kind of a citywide vision for what Denver feels, functions, and looks like all the way out to the year 2040. And in this particular location here at the Bellevue station, we've had a couple of different identifiers. One is that from a neighborhood context, it's considered an urban center. And that, without trying to get into a bunch of planning jargon, just simply means that it's expected to see some new development. It's not an established site, obviously. And that'll be mixed use, very pedestrian friendly, multimodal in nature, a lot of mix of uses and active for a large part of the day. And then it's also a regional center, which we have about 8 or 9 regional centers across the city. And most of these are under development. One that may be more familiar as a more completed project would be a Cherry Creek, right? Cherry Creek's very much an urban center. It's mixed use, very pedestrian friendly, has a lot of activities, has residential, jobs, entertainment, all mixed into one location. Most of these regional centers that we have planned for the city are, again, along our light rail system. And so before I go to the next slide, I just wanted to point out, actually, why don't we go ahead to the next slide if we could. I'll just point out the the bottom part of that slide there talks about something called the Blueprint Denver Diagnostic. When we were updating Blueprint Denver, which the original Blueprint Denver from 2002, we took a hard look at that old document and saw what worked and what didn't work, and really tried to see what things we actually accomplished. One thing that we noticed was the expansion of the Southeast light rail line from RTD, when that was getting expanded, it was called T-Rex, opened up in 2006. And about 8 or 10 years later, we could compare the differences in commuting patterns before and after. And some of our neighborhoods that we saw the most dramatic reduction in single occupancy vehicle or SOV commuters, so folks driving to work by themselves, were along that Southeast rail line. So imagine neighborhoods like Platt Park, Wash Park, University Hills. So some of those saw as much as 25% reduction. And so we hope to continue to see that as more TODs occur along the RTD system. The maps here allude to what I was just speaking to. The Future Places map there on the right side identifies the Belleview station as well as the Denver Tech Center to the east of I-25 as a regional center. And so again, mixed use, very pedestrian friendly, multimodal, and buildings up to 20 stories or so. And that plays a big part of our growth strategy of Blueprint Denver. And we are trying to direct up to 50% of all jobs and 30% of all new housing by 2040 into our regional centers. Now, downtown is also regional center, so that's a significant portion of that amount of growth. But it is important from a strategy standpoint if we want to strengthen our neighborhoods to direct growth where it's most appropriate and where we put infrastructure to move people. And this is a great example here at the Belleview station. I think that's next slide, and I believe I'm handing it back off for.
Yes, hi, you're handing it off to me, David. Let's see if I can coordinate all of these things at once, but thank you, David. In addition to land use and transportation plans, the city of Denver has also invested in a number of other plans, and I'm going to focus a little bit in here on our multimodal efforts and plans. So on the left here, we have a graphic that shows what the Denver Moves bike network is for this area. That's both existing facilities as well as recommended facilities. So you can see here in this area, and I see that one of the questions is Bellevue Station within the city of Denver? You can see the kind of faint dotted line, and in the previous maps, you could kind of see that area that was highlighted. That is within the city of Denver, and that's a really good question because, you know, I don't think everyone quite understands that we have this funny little rectangle here at the bottom of Denver that goes all the way down to Bellevue. So anyway, what the bike network recommends is both utilizing Monaco Street as a north-south connector, South Ulster Street, which actually we implemented a bike lane just a few years ago. There's also a really great recreational and regional Goldsmith Gulch Trail. And then there's that exists today. And then there's a recommendation for Yosemite Street. As you can see, Union Avenue actually already has a bike lane on it. And that's kind of the only east-west connector that currently exists or is recommended south of that 225 interstate. And then on the right, we also have a citywide transit plan called Denver Moves Transit. And that looks at all of our major corridors and looks at which of those corridors have capacity or do we want to really emphasize different types of transit on. And so you can see that in this area, once again, really we have Quebec, not once again, but we have Quebec as kind of the main north-south connector. And then we really rely very heavily on the transit in that area in terms of the light rail. So we're looking at the EFR, and then the H line is kind of the main ways to get folks around. But I think as you'll see in the next slide, there's an important kind of missing component in that transit, which is kind of how do we get folks from kind of that east to west side. So in addition to these citywide plans, just last year in 2019, we completed a multimodal network plan, or sorry, a Bellevue Corridor multimodal transportation plan. That involved stakeholders, both from the city and county of Denver, as well as Greenwood Village, CDOT and RTD. And it took a close look at kind of this whole general North DTC area that falls within the city and county of Denver. This slide just highlights kind of the main roads that we're talking about today that have to do with those two, the two alternatives that really is what we're going to get to discussing a little bit later on. But I think important things to note are that, I think everyone knows this in this area, I-25 can really be a big barrier. So I know that project team looked very closely at how do we overcome that barrier and used a lot of existing conditions to come up with the recommendations that we talked about. It also recognizes that Bellevue, as many probably would anticipate, is not a great multimodal option in terms of pedestrians and bicyclists and folks on wheelchairs trying to traverse east and west in that area. It recognizes that that interchanges can definitely produce some difficult, it can be difficult for multimodal facilities to get across those interchanges, primarily the ones that exist today in this area being the Bellevue interchange, and then it's not in this map, but the Goldsmith interchange. And then again, as everyone has probably seen, it recognizes Union currently serves as kind of the most comfortable multimodal network that goes east and west, or multimodal east-west connection in the area. And then finally, some of the other plans or studies that Denver is excited about that touch this area are not actually being led by Denver, but Denver has been involved in and is very supportive of, are plans that think about kind of our future and what does our future hold, especially as it comes to innovation and technology. I think, we got a really good opportunity to experience just how quickly technology can come at us just the past couple of years when scooters hit the streets of Denver. And so Denver recognizes, as do a lot of our partners in the area, that there's a lot of things that are coming our way in the next several years and decades that we can't necessarily tell you what they're going to be today, but it's important to kind of think through how our infrastructure can be supportive of those innovations as they come about. And so one study that's just wrapped up is that was conducted by Denver South Transportation Management Authority or Association, I apologize, looked at the 7 light rail stations, and they're a partner on the Bellevue I-25 project. They looked at the 7 light rail stations kind of within their purview that go from Bellevue South to Skyridge. And they assessed and this is all pretty much based on existing conditions, but the mobility needs and the infrastructure readiness to evaluate what stations are good candidates for future innovation and opportunities. And so what stood out to Denver in looking at that report is that within that report, Bellevue Station really stands out as one of the leaders in all of the categories listed below in terms of innovation, like a good home for these new innovative ideas, whether it's automated shuttles, mobility as a service, microtransit. There's just, because of the existing infrastructure, the needs and the readiness, Bellevue definitely rises to the top in that study. And then at the bottom, we want to point out that in addition to kind of thinking through kind of that high level and in anticipation, we're trying to address technology of today that we just talked about, scooters. So the scooters are not only an interesting and fun technology, but they present a lot of different and complicated questions about how do we manage where scooters can go, et cetera. And so Bellevue was once again selected as a great location to pilot a program to look at the cross-jurisdictional opportunities for things like scooters and other micromobility. And so that's a project that I believe was kicking off and then has kind of, it says ongoing, it was put on hold, I think, for a variety of reasons, including, if we're experiencing a really fun time in the world right now with COVID that has definitely changed our transportation habits currently. But that's another just example of how Bellevue is a good place and hub for some of these innovative strategies. And so finally, we want to talk about, I want to mention the Southeast Mobility Hub study. Some of you may have heard about this, but this is a study that's really just kicking off. And what it does is it ties together a lot of the things we just talked about: land use and transportation, multimodal, and innovation. And this study, the goal of this study or this effort is to look at all that work, look at all the data we've collected both at Bellevue as well as Southmore and Yale, 2 other stations in Denver that have had a lot of have had a lot of studies done and data collected, and come up with what we would consider a strategy document that looks at how do we combine those things in order to really make these places what we would consider mobility hubs? So there's a definition there, but really looks at making the community, making those hubs a focal point. Really trying to increase the reach of transit is one of the big goals, and all of that kind of, rolls in together with some of Denver's overarching goals that we haven't necessarily mentioned, but I imagine some of you on the call may be familiar with, but we have our Mayor's Mobility Action Plan and those goals of trying to really recognize that Denver is growing as a city, and as it does, we can't necessarily accommodate on our roadways single occupancy vehicles, but need to be thinking about how can we encourage mode shift and encourage more folks to consider taking transit or riding their bikes or walking. And in order to do so, making sure that those options are both accessible and safe. And so studies like these that we just talked through and studies like this mobility hub are going to help us as Denver continues to grow and kind of grapple with that density and try to find different ways to move people safely and comfortably throughout the city. And so with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Afor.
Okay, yes, here we are. All right, thanks Ashley, and thanks everybody for getting through some of that information with us. We have another poll question for you. In the beginning, we asked, how do you use transportation, or what modes of transportation have you used in the last year? Now we're looking at the future. What do you want to use more of? What would you like to use more of in the future? So we've got some answers and responses coming in here. Thinking in the future, how do you want to get around this area in particular? Give you a second here. All right. Maybe another 10 seconds to get a few more responses in. All right, so it looks like, yep, light rail and walking. People in the future would like to do more of that. That's great to see. Now, and I didn't figure this out last time, but you can actually close down this poll box on your own. So make sure to click that little X so you can see the rest of the presentation here. So we do have some time for questions, and we want to make sure that the questions we're addressing right now at this point are kind of really related to the information, the plans, the studies that we just covered. So if there's some clarifying questions here, we'll jump to those. So it looks like we do have a couple that we'll start with. I know people have a lot of questions about the project that we'll get to in the second half, but let's start with this one here. So do you envision improving the east-west flow in the proximity of East Temple and South Yosemite? So a little context, it currently throttles to only a single lane in both directions immediately west of South Yosemite. Painting in a bike lane, leaving a left turn lane well narrower than the typical 11 feet lane width seems to have been terribly short-sighted. Okay, so wanting to know about improving the east-west flow in proximity of East Temple and South Yosemite. Let's see, Ashley? Want to help us with that?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, and I would say that it's not one that I think it kind of went outside the scope of this specific project that we're talking about today. As far as East Temple and South Yosemite, that is an interesting little stretch. And I guess I would answer that with, this is a great comment and one for our department to take back and think a little bit, or think about in more depth. And we can definitely send that to also our 311 area engineer who can kind of look at that. And actually Jane Boand is on the call. And Jane, do you recall by chance if that specific stretch was considered in our Bellevue station area?
Sorry, I'm flickering in and out here. Not specifically. We were focused on the parallel streets of Monaco, Syracuse, Bellevue, Union, Quincy, and then the connecting streets in between. So yeah, I don't have a specific answer for you on that one.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that one's probably a little bit outside of the scope of our conversation today, but it's a really good one, and one that Denver will take back and we can definitely look into a little bit.
All right, great. So it does look like there's a lot of questions coming in specifically related to the project, and then some other questions maybe outside of the scope of this project. We do want to make sure we have a lot of time to talk specifically about the things at hand tonight and to give people an opportunity to voice some of their comments later in the breakout sessions. So if I'm not seeing any more questions specifically about the material coming in, we will move forward and get to a lot of the other questions a little bit later. So, you know, as we go through this kind of evening, we've talked a lot about plans and studies. And actually, if you want to kind of advance that slide so people can see where we're at with things. But we've talked a lot about plans and studies, and then usually, you know, projects come after that. So it's an interesting kind of balance that has to be struck between what we want to see in an area and then what some of the challenges are of today that we might see. So John is going to talk with us a little bit about the project that we see right now in this area and some of the challenges, you know, of congestion at this highly utilized interchange, which is Belleview I-25. So John.
Thank you all for really appreciate being here tonight and getting a chance to talk with everyone about this important project for the region here through the Tech Center. Again, my name is John Chesser with Wilson & Company. We are the consultant team that's been hired by the funding partners of this project to you know, develop options and work through the process of understanding you know, what alternatives do we have here at this interchange to be able to address the issues that are out there today. So again, thanks for being here tonight. Before I dive into a little bit of detail here, I do want to mention a couple things. We have a project website. It's improveI25bellevue.com. Again, that's improveI25bellevue.com. There's a lot of information on the project at that website, project documentation, also a video of a public webinar that we gave just a couple weeks ago on October 7th. That's a longer version, a lot more detail than what I'm going to be getting into tonight. Tonight is more of a summary of that. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that video, I encourage you to do so. If you haven't had a chance to check out the website, I also encourage you to do that. A lot of good information there, as well as the ability to continue commenting through that website. And the project team picks up all of those comments that come through the website, as well as all these evening webinars. So encourage everybody to make use of that information and continue engaging in the project long after tonight. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the project that we have here. If we can actually go back a slide, Ashley, thank you so much. In about 2018, the funding partners for this project, which are Arapahoe County, Greenwood Village, the City and County of Denver, and the Denver South TMA, got together and looked at ways to advance the conversation from some of the plans and studies that you heard about earlier, and really focus on the I-25 Bellevue interchange and the congestion, the safety issues that exist in that interchange complex. And that's really what the focus of our study has been. So at the beginning, in about the fall of 2018, we developed a project purpose and need. This is really important because this is our backbone throughout all the lifespan of the project. Purpose really is why are we here, and the needs are what problems are we trying to solve. So this is a summarized version that you see on your screen of what the longer purpose and need is for this project, but it boils it down to what you see here. The needs here were really identified by all the partners as improving traffic operations, improving safety, and enhancing multimodal choices and connectivity for all users. So as we went through the development of alternatives, the screening of alternatives, to get down to the two that we're going to talk about in a little more detail tonight, this has been consistent. This is the same purpose need that we had in 2018 and will remain consistent throughout the life of the project. In addition to this purpose and need, some of the things that have stayed consistent are the evaluation criteria with which we measure these alternatives against each other. And that has driven our screening process as we've gone through. So in addition to the funding partners that we have that I mentioned before, we have a lot of project stakeholders that have also been involved since 2018. Dr. Cog, RTD, CDOT and FHWA, Cherry Hills Village have all been a part of our team in advancing the conversation from where we were a couple years ago to where we are today. And we'll be a part of the conversation as we move forward. I want to take a minute to recognize a couple folks that have been integral from the City and County of Denver side. Jane Boland has been part of our team since 2018. Ashley Grace, who you heard from a little bit earlier, Jane as well, and Brian Pinkerton, who you might hear from in a little bit, have been part of our conversation for about the last year and have really helped advance the conversation and really speak for City and County of Denver and the values and priorities that that agency brings to the table. So thank you guys for being a part of the process, and look forward to working with you as you go on. So let's move on to the next slide and start talking a little bit more about the project. So as has been mentioned, there are two main interchange alternatives that we're going to talk about after this slide. But before we get there, I want to mention some specific intersection improvements that are common to both alternatives. So these are, as folks know, users of the interchange know, you can do a lot with the ramps from I-25, you can do a lot on Bellevue. If we don't address the Bellevue and Quebec intersection and the Bellevue and Syracuse intersection in concert with those interchange alternatives, we'll be missing the point. That hasn't been lost on this project team. It's been part of our discussion from the very beginning. So we have looked at different intersection options for each of these two intersections. And really what we focused in on through our analysis is that it's the left turns at each of these intersections, specifically at Quebec and Bellevue, that really are causing the problem with congestion, with backing up, with folks unable to move through this corridor efficiently. It has a lot to do with those left turns. So we have looked into some details for how we can resolve that issue. What can we do with those left turns? And we don't have enough to show you today any of the designs that have come out of that. Those designs will be advancing with whatever interchange alternative is selected to move forward with this project. It will include the improvements at Quebec and Bellevue and at Syracuse and Bellevue. And that's really important to acknowledge here at this stage. So as we talk through the rest of the presentation here and we focus on the larger interchange alternatives, don't lose sight that the intersection improvements will be a part of that package as we move forward to the preliminary design and some of the other processes to come. Next slide, please. All right, looking at the first of our two alternatives here. This is a single point urban interchange, affectionately known as a SPUI. A couple things that I want to note here on this particular slide. The bright blue improvements that you see here are roadway improvements. These are vehicle-oriented roadway impact construction type improvements that we're going to see through this project. And the bright pink are multimodal type improvements. So I want to talk about these for just a second. On the south side of Bellevue, as users of the interchange may know, there are no connecting sidewalks. With either alternative that moves forward, those sidewalks will be connected. That connectivity will be made underneath I-25 using Bellevue on the south side. That's an important part of the connectivity, multimodal connectivity piece we discussed earlier. The other two lines that you see on here with the little circles at the end are new grade separated crossings of I-25 for bicycles and pedestrians. Now, both of these alternatives, both of these locations will not move forward. We will end up selecting one of these two approximate locations to put that new bridge, that new grade separated crossing of I-25. And so you're going to see this on other slides as we go forward. I just want to make sure everybody knows only one of these two locations will be selected, and that will happen in the next phase of design. We simply don't have enough information right now at this stage to be able to make that decision, and want to be able to collect more of that as we move forward and really select the right location for that grade separated crossing. But again, you'll see this in the SPUI, you'll see this in the split diamond alternative that we're going to talk about next. Okay, let's talk about the roadway improvements a little bit. How would a SPUI function? What's the benefit of it? Why did it make it through all the screening to get to where we are here in the final two? Well, what the SPUI does is it addresses the issue of the 4 tightly spaced signalized intersections that exist on Bellevue in the immediate vicinity of the interchange. And those would be Quebec, the southbound ramps for I-25, the northbound ramps for I-25, and Syracuse. In about a quarter mile, there are 4 signalized intersections, and this just wreaks havoc on congestion, the ability to move people through this corridor. Whether you're wanting to make turns and get on I-25, whether you're wanting to proceed through the interchange, it causes a lot of congestion issues that we see. Signal timing is almost impossible to make perfect when you have so many tightly spaced intersections. So what the SPUI does is it takes those 2 ramp terminals for I-25, northbound and southbound, and instead of having them come to their own individual intersection, it brings them into one. So it takes those 2 intersections and it makes them one signalized intersection underneath I-25. This allows signal timing to be better. This allows the flow of traffic to be better. It allows for folks to get to where they want to be through this piece more efficiently than you would today. You just get tremendous benefit taking those 4 intersections and making them 3. By consolidating those ramp terminals underneath I-25, there are some pieces that come along with how the SPUI would be built. First, I'll talk about Bellevue. So there's some pretty significant reconstruction of Bellevue Avenue that would take place in this alternative. A new lane, a new through lane would be added on Bellevue that would proceed all the way through the interchange. In order to keep traffic operations where we need to be, another lane is necessary there. In addition, as you look at the turning movements at each of the intersections that come through, we basically would need to reconstruct Bellevue from west of Quebec to east of Syracuse, all the way through in this alternative. Pretty significant impacts to Bellevue. In addition, by moving the intersection underneath I-25, the profile of I-25 needs to be raised by about 8 feet. That requires the replacement of the I-25 bridge over Bellevue. When you replace the I-25 bridge over Bellevue and raise it 8 feet, you have to taper that new construction out to meet the existing grade of I-25. It's about a half a mile of reconstruction of I-25. So all of those pieces are necessary to build the SPUI, to get the SPUI designed and to be operating the way that it needs to be. Once it's there, the SPUI operates better. And when I say operates better, I'm not thinking just today. As we go through this kind of analysis, it's important that we look at a horizon year. Our horizon year for this project is 2040. We're not just trying to solve the problems of today, but the problems that we see in our forecasting, our traffic modeling in 2040. It's a requirement of this type of analysis and gives us an idea to make sure that whatever we're proposing here is better than doing nothing in 2040. And this alternative is better than the no build in 2040. It operates better as an interchange. So that's a little bit about the SPUI. Again, there's more detail that's provided in that October 7th public meeting. Take a look at that video if you want a little bit more detail there. But that's how the SPUI works. It consolidates intersections. We remove one of the signals, and we're able to move people through this interchange a bit faster. Next slide, please. Okay, alternative number 2. This is the split diamond alternative. As you'll see, you have the roadway improvements in the blue, the multimodal type improvements in the pink. The difference here is that with the split diamond, there are 2 new intersections on Union. So there are new roadway improvements and multimodal improvements as mitigation on Union. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. And so the reason that the split diamond advanced to this stage is that it disperses traffic throughout the interchange complex better than what is done today. So by providing new access on Union from I-25 and from 225 and keeping the access at Bellevue, you're able to disperse traffic. Folks are able to get to where they want to go, their destinations, more efficiently. So those folks wanting to use the northern part of this interchange complex, places off of Union, the development that's there, the light rail station, those folks don't need to use Bellevue in this scenario. They'd be able to get off and use Union to get to where they want to go. So what we see is a reduction in traffic volumes on Union in 2040 by about 12 to 15%, and an increase in traffic volumes on Union in 2040 of about 30 to 34%. Now, this isn't over what we see today. Traffic on Union, traffic on Bellevue is going to increase if we do nothing. So this is over the no build. So by decreasing traffic on Bellevue volumes, increasing volumes of traffic on Union, folks are able to get to where they want to be a little bit more efficiently. That allows the interchange complex as a whole to operate better. So let's talk about how that would get done in a little more detail. I want to take the northbound section, north is to the right on this graphic, and take the northbound section and talk about that, a little bit of how it operates. If you want to access Bellevue from northbound I-25, you would do so as you do today. You take the off ramp, get to Bellevue. You could go east and west on Bellevue. Nothing changes there. The difference with this alternative is if you wanted to access Union rather than needing to go east or west on Bellevue and then up to Union, you could proceed through that intersection on an elevated ramp that would go up to and meet Union at grade above I-25 at a new intersection. That allows you to go east and west at that intersection. Continuing from that intersection, if you wanted to go north to get to I-25, that access remains. If you want to get to 225 from there, that access would remain as well. Southbound, it's very similar. If you're exiting I-25 kind of off the page here, To the north, that exit doesn't change. The exit stays in the same location. Once you're on that ramp then, and you're proceeding towards Union and Bellevue, if your destination is somewhere on the northern part of the interchange or east and west, that ramp would go up to and meet Union. You could go east and west on Union from there, or if your destination was Bellevue or somewhere to the south, you'd be able to continue on that ramp down to Bellevue and go east and west on Bellevue. Access to I-25 South stays the same at Bellevue. And so the real difference here, again, is that being able to give the traveling public more opportunity to get to where they want to go more efficiently spreads traffic out throughout the intersection and gets folks to those destination points more efficiently, again, with a reduction of traffic on Bellevue and an increase of traffic on Union. So you'll notice on Union, we have both blue and pink dashed lines there. So what are we talking about there? What happens on Union? Well, with the two new intersections on Union, and what's being added to Union in this scenario is we're widening Union by about 15 feet in this alternative, 14 feet, I think it is, to add a couple different things. One is a new turn lane. So what doesn't exist on Union today is a turn lane. So if you're traveling, say, eastbound on Union and you want to go northbound on I-25, you need a left turn lane to be able to make that movement. That doesn't exist today. So we need, 10 feet, 12 feet, whatever it is, for a new turn lane on Union. That's the only new lane that's being added there. But understanding that with more vehicles comes impacts to the multimodal traveling public, multimodal users on Union. The project team worked with City and County of Denver and others to be able to develop some mitigation to add to the project here, understanding that there's some impacts from the vehicle. So this alternative includes the sidewalk would remain on Union. There would be an enhanced buffer between the sidewalk and the bike lane. Bike lane would remain. There would be an enhanced buffer between the bike lane and the transit lane. Transit lane would remain. So even though there's no transit operating on Union now, there has been in the past, there may be in the future, that transit lane is staying in this alternative. And then you have your travel lanes and the new turn lanes. So by widening out the bridge about 14 feet, adding in those mitigation options, trying to make the trip across I-25 on Union a little more comfortable, that's the mitigation that's been added there. In addition to the new grade separated crossings of I-25, which again, one of those two locations will be chosen. So folks that don't feel as comfortable maybe walking on Union, with the increased traffic, have another alternative in being able to cross I-25 with the grade separated crossing. So a couple of visuals, we go to the next slide, that kind of illustrate northbound and southbound how this would work. This is today, and this is northbound from Bellevue, getting onto I-25, getting onto 225. So you've made your turn from Bellevue, you're headed north on this ramp, I-25 is there off to the left. This is today where the ramp proceeds underneath Union, and then you can make your way to I-25 and 225. In the proposed split diamond scenario, this ramp would no longer go underneath Union, it would go up to and meet Union at a new intersection. And then folks could go east or west from there. Same thing southbound if we switch to the next slide. This ramp continues underneath Union today. In the future, in the proposed split diamond condition, this ramp would go up to and meet Union at Union's elevated level. New intersection there, folks could go east and west on Union. So the entrance and exit points for I-25 stay the same, 225 stay the same. Once you're on those ramps, the ramp would proceed up to Union instead of going underneath as it does today. So it gives you a little bit of a visual of what we're looking at there. Thanks, Ashley, that's perfect. So let's talk about what this means from the standpoint of benefit to the traveling public. So this is vehicle travel times. We looked at Bellevue and Union, different legs throughout the corridor, and looked at what is the difference. If we do nothing, how do the SPUI and the split diamond help the condition, help the travel time for folks wanting to get through the corridor? So let's take Bellevue Avenue. Let's pick a couple examples here. If I'm on, we'll take the top couple lines. If I'm on Monaco, if I'm on Bellevue at Monaco, and I want to know how long is it going to take me before I can turn left to get onto I-25 through the interchange there. The far right columns give you an idea of what the savings would be over the no build, over doing nothing. And so you'll see a couple different options here. I'll encourage folks to, as an example, we can look at the SPUI with the frontage road. That's one of the intersection options at Quebec. And then there's also two lines over the split diamond with the frontage road. So if I'm at Monaco on Bellevue, if I'm at Monaco and I want to turn left onto I-25, the SPUI would offer me almost a 2-minute improvement over doing nothing in 2040. And the split diamond would offer me almost a 3-minute improvement. That's in the AM peak hour. So this is AM rush hour. We pick the peak hour, the worst hour in the AM. Those are the travel time savings that you get. In the PM, on that same movement, it's enhanced. As users of the interchange know, the PM is the worst condition of the day. We picked the PM peak hour, the worst condition in the day. And those travel time savings, say with the SPUI, would be about 2.5 minutes. And with the split diamond, the savings would be about 5.5 minutes. So you get a little bit of a difference there when you're looking at the SPUI versus the split diamond for folks on Bellevue. Similarly on Bellevue, if I'm on Monaco and I want to go through the interchange all the way to DTC, I don't want to get on I-25 at all. Eastbound, looking at those numbers, again, let's see, in the AM for the SPUI with the frontage road, it's within about 1/2 minute of doing nothing. Pretty consistent with where the no build is. In the split diamond, you get about 1 minute of savings in the AM. In the PM, where it's really nasty, you get about 2.5 minutes of savings with the SPUI and about 4 minutes of savings with the split diamond. So this is really attributed to the fact that in the split diamond, you're taking vehicle volumes off of Bellevue. And that allows Bellevue to flow better. As you saw in the previous slides, there is no major reconstruction of Bellevue or I-25 with the split diamond. That's because by reducing the amount of volumes, even by 12 or 15%, which is huge in this situation, you get the benefit right there without needing improvements to Bellevue. So that's why you see those time differences there. Let's look at Union. This is important to folks who are in the northern part of the interchange complex here. If you're wanting to go from Monaco to Syracuse on Union, let's say you're eastbound, take that worst condition in the PM, the SPUI with the frontage road is making the condition over the no build. The condition is worse by about 1/3 of a minute. And in the split diamond, it's worse by about 1 minute. And again, that can be attributed to the fact that with the split diamond, there's an increase in traffic volumes on Union. And so you get a little bit of a difference there in travel times where the SPUI is not making any improvements to Union. So because traffic gets a little worse in 2040, there's a bump up there, but not what you see in the split diamond. So this gives you an idea of what we're talking about when we look at, say, hey, the split diamond takes traffic off of Bellevue, adds it to Union. Well, what does that mean for us that use the interchange, all the time? This is what that means. There's travel time savings in different ways. There's travel time reductions in different ways. It gives you an idea of what we're looking at. Again, more information on the project website if you'd like to dive into a little more detail with this. All right, so with all of that information, what this slide presents are the technical advantages of each alternative. We've talked through a number of these already. I'll highlight a couple of them. With the SPUI on the left-hand side, again, you're decreasing the number of ramp intersections from 2 to 1. You take those ramp terminals, you move it underneath I-25 to 1 intersection. That reduces the opportunity for vehicle conflicts on Bellevue there. The SPUI also has the lower overall risk of environmental resource impacts based on the conceptual design that we sit at today, which includes community impacts. With no improvements to Union, there is the ability to maintain the existing community feel on Union. Again, traffic's going to go up regardless of what we do, but additional traffic is added in that split diamond. So lower estimated right-of-way impacts for the SPUI. It can be constructed without widening of Union, without any impacts on Union. And also includes that new grade separated bicycle and pedestrian crossing of I-25. Technical advantage of the split diamond, again, we talked through a number of these. This alternative does perform the best overall for vehicle traffic operations throughout the interchange complex as a whole. When looking at all of the users of the interchange, you get the best overall traffic performance there. This is because it provides more efficient options for folks to get to where they want to be. There's options available with access to Union for folks in the northern part of the interchange that want to get to where they go there. The split diamond can be constructed without the replacement of the I-25 bridge over Bellevue and the reconstruction of I-25, which we saw in the SPUI. Opportunities to phase construction. I mean, with the split diamond, you really could build just the northbound side or just the southbound side if that proved out to be a critical component of the job, or if funding simply wasn't available to do it all. So the ability to phase this alternative is big. Belleview and I-25 can remain operational during construction because there's not heavy impacts there. Then of course we have the new grade separated bicycle and pedestrian crossing over I-25. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the technical advantages of each. These really are apples and oranges type alternatives that we're working through here. That's why it's so important that we hear from you, we hear from the users of the interchange. What are your priorities? What are your values when you look at improvements to this interchange? We have two alternatives that really go about doing it in very different ways. The important piece to note here is that both the SPUI and the split diamond offer a benefit to traffic operations over doing nothing, over the no build. And that's an important piece for everybody to remember as you go forward. So really interested to hear some more about the values and the priorities in this community. And we've heard a lot through the public involvement process that we've been going through. Encourage you to stick with it and keep commenting as we go along. So where do we go from here? We have a star highlighted here in 2020. As I said, we've been looking at this particular project since 2018. Right now, we are in the public involvement process. What we're going to do with the information that we gather through this public process is pair it up with all the technical analysis that we've been collecting for the last 2 years. And we're going to take the technical analysis, we're going to take the public input, and we're going to pull those together. And our executive committee, made up of elected officials and executives from all of the agencies I mentioned earlier, are hopefully going to get to a decision on which alternative to advance to the next stage of the project. That next stage is preliminary design and need, but we're currently in conceptual design. Preliminary design will allow us to keep refining, keep addressing some of the concerns, some of the thoughts that come up in the design process, and continue making that better as we go through. What's important to note here, looking forward, looking beyond this year, looking beyond that decision, is that there is no construction funding for this project right now. I'll repeat that. There is no construction funding for this project right now. So this is not a project that's going to be under construction next year or the year after that. There's a process that needs to take place here. What we are doing as a project team is working with all the stakeholders to identify funding opportunities. For example, this project is currently on CDOT's 5 to 10 year plan for transportation projects in the state. That is not a funded plan, but it's better to be on the plan than not. As we're talking about competing against other priorities in the area, other projects in the area for money, for limited resources, being on that plan is huge. It means you're part of the conversation going forward. Similarly, DRCOG's going through its 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, their RTP process, and both CDOT and Arapahoe County have proposed this project for inclusion on that 2050 plan. Again, that opens all kinds of doors to be available, to be accessible for different kinds of funding, including federal funding as the project goes forward. So as we move through preliminary design and other federal processes in the next couple of years, assuming we get a decision here from the EC next month, we'll continue looking at those opportunities, continue building towards construction. Again, there is no money for final design and construction at this stage of the project. We're going to be looking for those. And it should be noted that 5 years from now, 2025, is the first year of that CDOT 5 to 10 year plan that we mentioned earlier. So by being a part of the conversation, by being on these plans, being considered for funding as we go forward, puts the project in a great position to get that funding and move forward with improving this really important interchange in the tech center area. So Ashley, I believe that is it for the presentation, and I am positive that there are a number of questions or clarifications or comments that have come in. So I think we have a few minutes to answer a bunch of those. Afor?
We do. Thank you, John.
Right.
And yes, we do have a lot of questions. Also wanting to keep in mind that we want to save some time for breakout sessions for people to really be able to have an opportunity to comment and have a discussion around this. So I'm going to start with a few of the questions that we have received here, and we can see how many we can get through. We will be putting all of these comments and questions that aren't answered tonight into a document that will be available for folks as well. So John, we'll start with the question here. We've talked, there was a chart that you showed that had like travel times and some of the impacts on different option. We've had a lot of people wondering, have the same kinds of studies and analysis been done for some of the other, streets like Monaco, Quincy, Bellevue, and Union seem to be the focus here, but people are wondering if those same kind of analysis have been done for some of the other nearby corridors.
Yeah, a really important question, because these type of alternatives don't affect just the area right at the interchange. We did look from a traffic analysis perspective out at Monaco, for example, all the way out to Syracuse, up Monaco to the Quincy Happy Canyon interchange. So we do have traffic volume numbers, and there are travel time numbers, for different movements throughout the corridor. We really focused for travel time on the big movements. So Bellevue being a big movement, Union, being able to move through the interchange, access I-25. Those were the big movements. Those tend to be up front on people's minds. So that's why we presented those here tonight. But our traffic analysis did include an in-depth study evaluation of, say, Monaco, all the way over to DTC and Syracuse, looking north and south of the interchange to understand the impact on some of those immediately adjacent local roads. I don't have all the details of those specific numbers today, but a lot of that information will be available on the project website.
Okay, great. That's what I was going to ask next is will people be able to access that information? So they'll be able to get to the website and see that information there. So we have another question here. So this, John, you could be good with this question as well, perhaps Jane, but thinking about all the partners that are involved in this project, how did they all come together? How did we all get to be partners on this project? And what are the responsibilities of each?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes a village to be able to pull off a project like this with the magnitude that we're talking about, with the impact of different jurisdictions, agencies that we have throughout the interchange complex. So a lot of this started with the previous studies that were mentioned earlier tonight, leading up to where we were in 2018. And what those studies did is they brought up the issue that we have here at this interchange, and said we don't have a solution in 2040 looking out long term for how we're going to address congestion, safety, multimodal connectivity at this interchange. And so coming off of those studies that were funded by different agencies, Arapahoe County, Denver funded different parts of those projects, those folks got together and said, hey, we need a solution here for 2040. These studies all point to the same problem. The Bellevue I-25 interchange is a major piece to the success of any of the studies, any of the improvements that we look at in this area. We've got to address that part. So Arapahoe County, City and County of Denver, Greenwood Village, and the Denver South TMA all pooled money together to fund this initial conceptual design and alternative screening and analysis phase. So those folks are the funding partners. The other agencies that I mentioned on the previous slide all have been involved. They contribute money as a funding partner, but they are major stakeholders and have vested interest in what's going on at this interchange with this improvement. So what we did is we took the opportunity to get technical folks from all of those agencies, and we developed a technical committee, technical advisory committee. That committee, made up of representatives from all of those agencies, met almost monthly for the last 2 years, diving through the technical analysis associated with screening the alternatives. In addition, there were executives and elected officials from those same agencies that made up an executive committee. That executive committee met at certain project milestones where decisions needed to be made to help advance to the next stage of the project, from each level of screening to the next, as an example. And those folks have met, I believe now, over the course of 2 years, they've met 8 times. At the executive level to keep the project moving forward, make those decisions that are necessary as we go through. So that's a little bit about how we got here with the agencies. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you. I have another question for you here. This one's from Stan. He says the question he hears from his residents at Stony Brook is this: what will happen to the traffic along their section of Union if entrances and exits to I-25 are added on Union? Their nearest major intersection is Yosemite and Union.
Right. So thank you, Stan, for that question. There's a lot of questions. Okay, so we talked about the 30% increase on Union with the split diamond. Where does that traffic go? How does that affect the surrounding areas, the surrounding jurisdictions? Well, a little bit of it goes east. We over the SPUI and the no build scenario, we see an increase in that peak hour of about 300 vehicles. I think we're looking at, let me see here. roughly 2,000 vehicles that are going to make that trip in the SPUI scenario. It's almost 2,300 that are making that trip east on Union in the split diamond. So not a huge increase, but an increase, folks going east. So that's not everybody though. That's nowhere near 30%. Where are folks going? So we looked west, and that's where we see the biggest increase. Between I-25 and Monaco on Union, we see the biggest jumps in traffic volumes. That seems to be where folks are wanting to go. So we looked at the three different segments, of Union between I-25 and Monaco, and those numbers are going up, significantly more than say that 300 we were looking at. So that's where folks want to go. Do those folks continue north and south on Monaco in the split diamond? Not really. We looked at the comparison between the SPUI and the split diamond, and the Monaco numbers are relatively close. I mean, within the margin of error of being very similar to each other. So those folks that are accessing Union from I-25 and from 225, they're not going to Monaco north and south of Union. A few of them are headed east, but the vast majority of them are heading west and getting off of Union somewhere between I-25 and Monaco. So there's the major development to the south. You have the residential communities and everything to the north. That seems to be where the folks want to go, according to our forecast modeling.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to do a couple more questions here, and then again, want to make sure we've got enough time for people to have discussions in the breakout rooms. John, I've got a few more for you, so I'm glad you got some water in between this.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about the process at a higher level? How do some of the ideas get screened out? For example, were you able to consider roundabouts as part of this project? So how does that process look in the higher level?
Yeah, so whoever sent in that comment, I really encourage you to go to the project website, look at that video from the October 7th meeting. It's going to dive into a little more detail on the different levels of the screening process. And so there were 3 levels. The first level really compares the alternatives that we came up with, which is a whole range of alternatives, maybe 12 to 15 total alternatives that we started with for the interchange. And it looks at fatal flaws. Is there any fatal flaw in these? Can they simply not be built? Is there something there? Only 2 alternatives were screened out at fatal flaw, which is good. That means the team did a good job kind of pulling together representative alternatives. So how do we get to then from those 10 or 12 down to 2? We started comparing alternatives against each other using the evaluation criteria that we all developed as a team at the very beginning: traffic operations, safety, multimodal, cost, community impacts, access. Those are all examples of the specific evaluation criteria. And we evaluated the alternatives on the table there from a qualitative perspective against each other. Which ones meet those criteria better than the others? So the alternatives screened out in that main middle part, that level 2 screening, it's not that they wouldn't do the job, it's that they didn't do it as well as the alternatives that advanced. They didn't perform as well. That allowed us to take 2 or 3 alternatives, a small batch, into level 3, which is a quantitative analysis, do a very detailed traffic evaluation on those specific alternatives to see really behind the scenes, how do these operate? Where are these guys? How are the benefits made throughout the interchange? Where do we see the improvements? Where do we see that we have issues? And did a deeper dive there. So we looked at a wide range of alternatives. We didn't necessarily look at roundabouts at the interchange, but I can tell you for some of the intersection improvements, north and south of Bellevue, on Bellevue, say at Quebec and Syracuse, roundabouts were looked at. Part of the analysis going forward didn't do as well as some of the alternatives that passed, but we looked at a wide range of alternatives and really used a great analysis, a great process to be able to get us down to the 2 that you see that blew the competition away, I guess, when it comes to providing improvements here to the interchange.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to do just a couple more questions. One is, has a decision already been made about which alternative will be moving forward?
Fantastic. This one always comes up in these kind of conversations. I can confidently say no. No decision has been made. It was really important to the executive committee that when we wrapped up the technical analysis, said, okay, that's the technical analysis. That makes sense. I hear what you're saying. This is what the data tells us. I also want to know what the users of the interchange feel about it. I want to know what their priorities and their values are. Does that match up with what we're seeing on the technical side? Do those jive? So before the executive committee, who's going to be the ultimate decision maker here on what moves forward, before they make that decision, They really wanted to hear from the public. That's why tonight is so important. It's why these meetings, before now and afterwards are so important. It's why it's important that we hear from everybody about your values, about your priorities. The executive committee is going to be taking that information in, pairing it up with the technical analysis, and using that to make a decision on which alternative is best to move forward. That decision is going to happen, next month, hopefully, as we're setting up the next round of EC meetings to get those folks together and evaluate everything that they heard through the public process and the 2 years of technical analysis. So no, a decision has not been made. It is coming soon, and your input is valuable in getting to that point.
All right, great. Yes. Everyone's input is really important here in this process. So, John, I'm going to have one more question for you, and then Ashley, I'm going to close out with a question before we get into breakout groups. So, John, thinking a little bit more ahead about the NEPA process, can you speak to the noise as part of the NEPA process? Maybe how and well will environmental impacts be looked at?
Yeah, I love that we got a NEPA question. That's my background. So, that's great. So where we are now is at the conceptual stage. We've looked at a very high level at potential impacts to environmental resources. Where that takes place, where we get into more of that detailed analysis, will be in preliminary design. So as the design advances, we're able to look at the individual environmental resources in more detail and assess, what are we looking at for impacts here? Noise specifically is always a hot button item for folks. It's big because it's not something that happens over there. Noise comes into your bubble. It comes into your world. So I understand why that is part of the question that was answered. There's two pieces to noise: construction impacts and then impacts resulting from the project when it's done. What we have looked at here is from a construction impact perspective. There's going to be noise depending on which alternative is chosen. That construction is taking place in different areas. And so you have construction on I-25 and on Belleview that's different than having construction on Union, as an example. So that will be temporary. That will last the life of the construction project, which will be a couple years. I mean, this isn't something that'll get built in one summer. This is a multi-year deal, depending, again, on which alternative is chosen. So then looking at what happens to noise afterwards, well, noise comes from the addition of traffic volumes at speed. So moving traffic closer to potential noise receptors is big, or adding volumes at speed. So by increasing volumes, say on Bellevue and Union, the volumes are going up in either case, based on from where we sit today. There's the potential for impacts there, but it's already a loud corridor. There's already I-25 down here through the middle of it. You've got heavily used Bellevue going east and west. You have Union. This is already a heavily traveled corridor. So when we talk about adding another lane on Bellevue or adding a turn lane on Union, we are not expecting that the impacts that we would get from a noise perspective would be that great from a permanent standpoint, a post-construction type of standpoint. But again, all of that will be evaluated in tremendous detail in the NEPA phase, in the preliminary design phase as we move forward in the next stage of the project.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm assuming that you'll have an FAQ for folks specifically related to the project that we can share and pass around. And then Ashley, just kind of a final question for you. So we're wondering, the remarks that we've seen in the chat, the comments, will we be able to document those? Will they be added to the record? Will we be sharing that stuff? Or how do attendees need to comment aside from the breakout groups to make sure that they're heard in this process?
It's a good question, and I think, John, you could maybe also jump in a little bit, but Denver is definitely documenting everything that is shared here today in the chat box, as well as we will be recording our breakouts for internal review, just so that we can share those not just with Denver staff, but with the project staff as a whole. While Denver is hosting this meeting, the intent is to make sure that the feedback we gather is shared with all of our partners. And so we'll definitely have a lot of resources that will continue to be available on the Bellevue I-25 homepage for the project. As far as kind of where folks can review these comments, et cetera, we're gonna, again, we're gonna work on getting an FAQ together that's a collective FAQ for the entire project. And again, John, you could speak to that, but that way that not only are Denver residents hearing the same information, but anyone interested in the project is hearing the same information. So John, can you speak to when that might be available?
Yeah, we're going to be compiling, as Ashley said, all of the comments that we receive from this entire public engagement process. We're going to be looking for, common topics, common themes, providing FAQs there. So as far as when that's going to be available, again, we're going to be compiling all that, organizing it, summarizing it, and providing that to the executive committee sometime in early to mid-November. So the idea would be that as that information becomes available, it's also posted on the project website. So I would say give us a few weeks here to compile everything. We have hundreds of comments that have come through. I think we're expecting almost 400 comments in total based on where we are now. So it'll take us a little bit to get through it, but it's about when it'll happen.
Okay. All right, great. So without further ado, let's get into some breakout groups. Before we do that, I just kind of want to remind all of our facilitators to hit record when you are in your breakout group. And for everybody here, we will be taking some vigilant notes. We'll have some prompts on the screen that you can look at to help kind of spark some conversation and some comments and any questions that you have that are really project related, we might have to defer for another time, but we really want to just get your feedback and your comments around priorities and your visions for this area. So we're going to send you off into breakout groups. We ask that you just please be respectful of everybody in your group and your facilitators, and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So we don't want to occupy time with one person speaking too much. So let's share the mic a little bit, and we'll get started here. All right. Looks like everybody's kind of filtering back in here. We've got just a few minutes, and I think what we'd like to do is, if there are some volunteers who wanted to do a quick report out, maybe 1 minute about some of the top things that you heard in your breakout group, that would be great. If Ashley or David want to start out and just give us a highlight, that'd be awesome of what you heard, or if you have somebody who volunteered from your room.
I can start off and I'll try to keep it very short. I did join a few minutes late because I got bumped to different meeting rooms, but what I did hear from our attendees was that they do really like Union today and how it functions. Multimodal, feel safe. And so I think there's a lot of support on keeping Union as a multimodal corridor. And several folks live right along Union or on Union and don't really support the split diamond and would prefer the SPUI if we went with any option. I think there was some conversation, but there's cons for both of these, and maybe almost a existing condition was a preferred alternative. So I think that's where we were at in our group.
Great. Thank you. Ashley, what about you? Do you want to do a quick report out?
Sure. Yeah, I think we had a really interesting conversation, I think, kind of on both sides of this. One was there's definitely concern about kind of, again, that network impact, especially up and around where Union and Yosemite intersect. And there's a large campus there of not just a high school, but I know there's several schools there. So concerns about, would this lead to more traffic and or more congestion, and safety concerns, especially for the folks who attend that school and the students there. And then on the flip side, there was a lot of questions of, or thoughts about, it is congested, it is hard to move around. And, it does seem that the split diamond, has a moderate increase in traffic, and maybe that's worth the trade-off. And so I don't think we had a necessarily, we all reached consensus, but there was differing point of views of kind of how these both have different positives and minuses.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I can share two really quick here. So we had a lot of the same kind of conversations in terms of really being able to use Union as that connection for people who are biking and walking, rolling. And there's a fear, with that being changed, where do people go? Because it's such a highway for people on feet and on wheels. So there was a concern kind of that change. And then also there was a lot of people who brought up the quality of life issues. So not just around transportation changes, but then quality of life, what does that look like under the two options? Noise and speeding, and also air quality, maybe going up, sound quality, going down. So just a concern of that for now and in the future. Really wanting to maybe discourage traffic, auto traffic, and continue to encourage the bicycling throughout the Denver, as we've been doing, kind of in the central Denver too. So Really kind of wanting to focus a little bit less on autos and a little bit more on other forms of travel. And then we also had somebody to mention, you know, it'd be good to look forward to the future as we consider like how people are commuting to work. Are they working more remotely? Is traffic to and from an office building going to be something that we see a lot of in the future? So making sure that we're keeping that in mind as we move forward with these options too. All right, and let's see, who else do we have in the room? Was it Brian?
Geneva.
Yeah, I can share a little bit.
Oh yeah,
So
Geneva.
really, that's okay. Really similar themes in our room. I heard that Union is the quote last remaining viaduct east-west, and there's interest in preserving that. A couple of really interesting points about kind of the future of the workforce and whether there will even be as many people commuting, considering how many of us have transferred and are working remotely currently. In terms of the priorities, and I thought these words were really powerful. The group said safety, health, welfare, connectivity, multimodal connectivity, bike access with kids, and we heard quite a lot about safety and just wanting to make sure that it really does feel safe, and then noise. So similar themes that we heard in the other groups about maintaining and prioritizing multimodal connectivity.
All right. Great. Well, thank you. It looks like we're right at time here, and I know that a lot of people have probably dropped off, so we'll kind of wrap things up. We will be taking these comments and all of your feedback and compiling them and being able to send them to the project team for their review of this public input. So we're there on you know, the input phase right now. And as we move forward, you know, we'll keep you informed. The project website, I think, will be a great place for people to access and get information around, you know, the progress where we're at with the NEPA phase and everything. So please reach out to us via email. Most of you probably have the website that was listed there at the front of the screen, at the front of the presentation. There it is again at the bottom. So write that down. We'll have information there available for you after this meeting, including the recording of this meeting and as much information as we're able to gather tonight from everybody. So with that, Ashley, do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, just that bit.ly specifically is if you have a comment that wasn't necessarily captured or you didn't get to share, that takes you directly to the comment page. But that is housed within the larger project page. Sorry, Afor, I didn't make that very clear earlier, but there's a project page and then a comment page. And so this is so you can make sure those comments are captured for the project. But again, as Afor said, we've recorded this, we're all sharing notes, and it'll be shared not just with Denver, but the whole project team. So.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time tonight, and we will be seeing you again soon. Have a good evening.